Selling out of all your material?
Yeah. I mean, I've got so much here for material-wise, but the attas, they went really fast. Oceanus and Saffron Musk flew out. Lonnie's almost gone, but there's new ones coming in, taking their place. So
now, do you save batches of those?
Batches, yes.
No, batches. Do you keep like a personal amount for yourself?
Not usually. Usually it's very small amounts. Like Saffron Musk, I have like under 1 ml, and it's usually for scent reference.
Exactly.
Just to keep for the next one. But there are some that I will keep bottles behind for myself, like Al Khida is one I just love wearing. So I'd set aside some of that just for me all the time.
So you do wear your own stuff?
Yeah, yes. Yeah. I think because it started that way, it was like, I make perfume because I couldn't find the perfume that I really wanted. It was so difficult, like 8 years ago, to find real natural perfume. So I was like, if I can't find it, I'll just make it. So it started out of that, and it still is that. Like,
what did you find first? Like, what was the oud? Was it oud?
Yeah, that was the main thing because it was a synthetic oud, but it just had a character that I didn't find anywhere else, and it attracted me to that. And then shortly after, I smelled Ensar's oud, and that was like, wow, yeah, this is...
How did you find it?
How did I find it?
Yeah.
It was actually a friend I have. I've not seen him for quite a while, and he's also like a real scent enthusiast. And he'd found Ensar oud. He showed me, I think, 4 ouds he bought. He bought a sample pack, and he bought Meroki 2004. And this oud just changed my whole perception of scent. It was the best thing I'd ever smelled. And it's still to this day, it holds a place in like the top 5 best ever things I've smelled.
You still have some?
I have a tiny amount. It's like a drip left, and I just use it just to smell and inspire me for other attas.
I wonder if that's how we all are. Like, I have certain stuff that no matter what, I have to save that last drip.
Yeah.
Can't imagine being without that mind, whatever it is.
Yeah. This stuff really gives you like a mind buzz as well. When you smell it, it's like it transports your mind somewhere else.
Have you studied any of that? What fragrance, especially oud, does to the mind?
No, not particularly. I've read things a lot through Ensar, and then I've read a lot of things on like PubMed, which is where they publish a lot of medical data. But that's less spiritual. That's more physical. So it's quite hard to find, for me, information on how it affects the mind, apart from there's 2 camps of thought: the scientific material world and then the spiritual world. And you don't often get many that mix both. So they'll show you like the spiritual implications of something with a lot of good proofs to show that this is actually what's happening. So we've lost that, like knowledge is split into those 2 camps, and now they rarely ever unite.
Definitely. What was I going to say? I mean, I've said this many times. If I could go back to college, knowing what I know now, of course, I would put everything into the study, oud in particular, but fragrance. The health benefits of it. And I always think health and spiritual tie in together.
Yeah,
I don't get into that with people because everybody is, just like the fragrance is so far off.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people connect with me because of the spiritual stuff.
Yes.
And a lot of people just miss it altogether.
Yeah. Very true. And I've had a lot of people I've spoke to who were kind of quite material minded, like in the science camps, and then they've explored natural perfumes, and they've kind of started to open up a lot to the spiritual implications of them, and knowing, like just sensing and feeling that when you smell this, a change takes place, and that it's how to quantify that and what is the effect it's having, because it could be quite unique on a lot of different people. a lot of people are repulsed by oud, for example. It's too, they say strong, like, and it's a lot of people who their noses are not trained. They can't tell the difference between quality, high quality and low quality, and synthetic and natural, and they tend to be repulsed by it quite often. Most types of oud, I find. So that's quite an interesting effect. That, you know, it's a bit like the eyes. You can when we see something, the retina, there's a slight delay in it going to our brain. So we see actually what we want to see. Science has shown that the eyes can actually block out things sometimes that are traumatic for us to see. So almost, I think the same applies to scent, that some people, they have a kind of blockage where they can't interpret. And I think it's because it's almost a pollution of synthetics around them, that they can no longer differentiate natural and synthetic and connect well with the natural. It's so unfamiliar to them.
Yeah, that fascinates me so much, is that study right there.
Yeah.
Because I talk with a lot of people, natural people, like people don't get natural perfume because they have to be desynthesized first.
Yes.
And personally, in my life, not on purpose, because I already knew the health benefits of naturals and whatnot, and I was prone to it, but I still went through my synthetic thing. But it's funny how slowly, month after month after month of doing this, like these synthetics just started blowing up.
Yeah,
I can't explain it. I'd say it on the channel, and most people, a lot of people can't connect with that. Versus, and then these naturals just start opening up to me. I've been able to pick up so many more fast. Vanilla is like the perfect example to talk about.
Yeah.
There is so much more to vanilla than vanillin, right? They use vanillin because mass popularity, it is the most accepted smell. Food, drink, perfume, everything, vanilla. But once you desynthesize and you, I mean, get into the actual bean, it's you need the whole start to end before you get to the vanillin itself.
Yes.
And it's just amazing fragrance in itself.
It is. They've actually shown that vanilla does this, is like what you'd asked, and I had read about this, that vanilla actually does have a physical calming effect. When you smell vanilla, there are, I don't know if it's serotonin that is released from smelling it, but it does trigger the brain to release chemicals and relax you.
That's what I was talking about with the brain, because there is proof, there's fact that smell does do stuff to the brain.
Yeah, definitely.
And make us healthier. I mean, of course, it's not studied because there's not billions of dollars.
Yeah.
There's only, when you compare it to synthetics and you take a profit and loss as a business guy, I mean, you just get greedy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the last markets that's left that there's this much increase in a product.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, when you buy a Glade air freshener at the dollar store, and then go into Nordstrom's or Saks or Blooming, whatever you guys have over in Europe, your fancy stores, and buy a bottle for $300-400, and it's the same ingredients.
Yeah.
I mean, as a business guy, it's just like greed.
It's crazy. I mean, everything's about money now, and there's a really nice book I've been reading, and it comes from exactly the same places like where my thoughts come from. It's called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by a gentleman called Robert M. Persig. And it's not so much about Zen, and it's not so much about motorcycle maintenance. They're just examples to show about quality. So he talks largely about quality and about why we don't see quality now and why quality is sloping off. And quantity is increasing, like poor quality and quantities on the up, and high quality, like real craftsmanship, is on the down. And it's about the state of mind and the society and everything. We're all being pushed towards materialism and just mass consumerism, that we're losing touch of real quality. And I've always, when I started the business, it's just quality was the number one goal, is achieve high quality. And that was almost it. It's like nourish my hobby, achieve maximum quality. And that was it. It wasn't really a business. It was a hobby, a therapy kind of for me, a creative outlet, because I'd quit being a musician. I didn't take as much therapy from art as I used to. So I needed a new creative outlet, because that's just the way I express myself, is through creativity. And perfume just kind of started as this like subtle little hobby, just a little thing to pass the time. And it just skyrocketed into delving into such a deep world of scent that it's just fascinating, endlessly fascinating.
I can see fragrance tying into sound pretty good.
Yeah, definitely, in sight as well, even. And
absolutely. Yeah, colors and all that, and taste, of course, taste.
Yeah, because cookery is so close with perfumery. They're really close, and art and music share a lot of facets with perfumery as well. And I'll often give examples of when I'm making a perfume. It's very much, the process is very much like a piece of artwork. You lay down your foundation, which is going to be your kind of bases and material, like a color to put down first, so that other colors can be accentuated afterwards on the canvas. And how every different perfumer has different style. You can be minimalist, surrealist, like in fantasy, very real, like a flavorist that would make reconstructions of natural scents from little parts of things, and all of those fascinate me.
And just right now, I'm talking to somebody who's doing it in fashion. They're doing what? Fragrance and fashion.
Oh, right. Wow, that's interesting.
Clothes design.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. And so naturals too. I was like, she's very natural into the clothing thing as she can be. And fragrance with that. I'm like, yeah.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I'd seen an interesting perfume advert, and it was a kind of dance hall kind of song with this lady dancing all around. It was very much like fashion orientated, but it was also, the dance is very expressive as well. And it was for a perfume. And I was really interested to see this advert because it was tying in a few things together: the sight, the sound, and the physical movements as well, relating to perfumery. And perfumery is the hardest to express. It's kind of the most distant one, because we can't rely on sight necessarily to describe it and get information about it. We have to use our sense of smell, obviously, primarily, and then our words, our speech, to try and express that almost intangible thing. You're taking something in, your brain's processing it, it's relating to all the other things that you've smelled similar to it, and then it's trying to express that in the best way it can. And that interests me as well, because that's trying to do a write-up of perfumery, so somebody can read something and really get a good idea of what that perfume smells like. That's an interesting translation of expression of smell into words.
Which is my art.
Yeah.
I do it for a few. Like when something really speaks to me, I really try to, and I think it's been recognized. I think but there's a couple, like even perfumers, I'll get on a live stream and they'll be part of it. And I'm like, I didn't know they were that connected to me, but they connect to, it's, what is he going to say next about it? And it's got to connect here. I can't, there's some that I just can't come up with stuff for just because it doesn't speak to me.
Exactly, yeah. And I'm the same. If somebody suggests a perfume to make, I've got to connect with that idea. Like I'd ran that recent competition on Instagram just for what attar I'll make next. And
I woke up to that this morning.
Yeah, reading through, there's some really nice suggestions, some really lovely things, but it's what you connect with most and what interests you most, what excites your mind to think, right, yeah, that's going to be really fun to do, and get people to take part as well, so it becomes a interactive experience.
Well, see, I might cut this part right now out, but
Sure.
a note you just mentioned, I was like, there's no way. I've been working with this one, sarsaparilla.
Uh-huh.
I was
Okay.
like, what the heck? You mentioned it, I think, in the last post or something.
Uh-huh.
You talked about it somewhere, and I was like, no way.
Yeah.
I have never seen it for sale though, and I would have bought it. And
I do have some, but I've not listed it. It's quite a difficult material. I got a few materials. I listed about 75% of them on Etsy, and about 25% are so difficult to bottle and to package that I'd left them just for the moment because I was so busy. And things like labdanum are really awkward to bottle. And these are even more difficult. They're like waxes. So I need to heat them and then bottle them all, measure them all first, and sell them in those set amounts. But I have a sarsaparilla CO2 and I have a sarsaparilla absolute that I made, but I haven't listed the absolute for sale.
How's the smell difference on each of them?
It's quite a big smell difference, but you can tell they're both sarsaparilla. So the CO2 has a kind of creamier aspect that is a little bit more like spikenard. It's warm, waxy, herbaceous, slightly powdery, and that unique sarsaparilla quality. The sarsaparilla absolute is much more bold. It doesn't have any of the creamy facets per se, apart from the dry down, but it's really bold. It's almost like the boldness of blackcurrant. Like it has that really warm body to it.
Perfect. Well, did you buy it from somebody, or did you make this?
I made it. Yeah, the absolute. Yeah, so this was a tincture I'd made about 3 years ago, kind of before I started making absolutes. And I'd kept it for a long time, and it was really useful for just adding certain qualities, but I needed to use a lot of it. And then that idea crossed my mind, like, I wonder if the scent will get stronger if I reduce it. And then I started reading a little bit and found some people were doing it that way. So I thought, right. And I think that was the first one I'd actually reduced to an absolute. And it was a real experience.
Do I have anything that you used it in?
I think sarsaparilla oud, if you have that atta. No, that was one of the ones that I did. I think I've only used it in 2 attas so far, or maybe 3. With the newest one, I even forget the name. I have 280 odd atlas now, and it's the newest one. I just named it in there.
Awesome. Okay. What did you have any plans for today besides chit-chat?
No, I don't. No, I got all of my work out of the way. Got all the parcels. Well, not all the parcels. Got a vast majority of them out the way. And I just had ingredients kicking around. I have the vanilla musk from last time that we made.
Awesome.
So that's changed quite a lot. You see, it was very cloudy, and now it's all black. And when you turn it, there's no cloudy layer at all. So that's just to show like how there's nothing being added since. It's just sat there. And in one day, it actually cleared up. So it's just kind of a good sign when you're making perfume. Have a look and see if it goes cloudy. If it persists, the cloudiness for like 3 or 4 days, it can be really negative for the atta.
Really?
Yeah.
So you have to get rid of it no matter what? So would you add different ingredients to accomplish that?
You can, yes. Yeah, tinctures really help, and really thick oils like the Laos benzoin that I use, the benzoin heart from White Lotus. That alone seems to help a lot, and then a tincture just clears it up very quickly.
Okay, but you don't want it smoky. How's it smelling then?
Yeah, it's nice. It still needs a lot of work to it, but it's got a really warm, kind of boozy, ambery vanilla. It slightly leans towards, like last time I said, there was kind of 2 scents dominant in it. One was that resinous, dark vanilla, and the other was the kind of warm, glowing, ambery henna. And that's dominating at the minute, the warm, ambery henna. And I wanted the vanilla to dominate more. So I'd looked at previous formula I'd made for another attar, which was vanilla imperial, and I'd used so much vanilla in that because I'd realized it's not like a lot of other ingredients. You need a lot of vanilla to really get the scent of vanilla across. It's not like oud. Oud you can use maybe 10% and it'll be really potent. Vanilla you can use 10% and it can be overcome by other ingredients. So I'm going to use a lot more vanilla in this, and probably some more sandalwood, vetiver.
And vanilla is expensive.
It is, yes, yeah. And I'm going to use the really top quality vanilla here, the CO2s that I have, and the oleoresins I will use as kind of support for them, and perhaps the absolute as well.
So we get, if you don't feel like working on that, we can talk about in depth. I know a lot of questions about what is an oleoresin, what is a resin, what is an absolute, what is all the different, as many as you know, melanges.
Yeah, sure.
Essential oil. What is essential oil? How do we get it? I mean, I think it's common to most people, but you never know.
Yeah. And I thought that's a good ground to cover. And it was something I wanted to put in my Etsy description. And also, I aim to try and get a blog up. So a lot of that basic information can be covered, and a lot of other information about attars and how they're made and things. But yeah, they're really good places to start for a lot of people who are wanting to do perfumery and don't really know where to start.
So let's talk this. We'll do that. So I'll lead with the questions. So basically, what we made tinctures.
Yeah,
we have those going. Is that all we need to make an attar? I'm going to start with basic questions and go that way.
All we need to make for what? Sorry.
So can I just take those tinctures and perfume with them? Is that all I need, or
right?
What's the next level of knowledge I need to get to actually make a composition?
Right. Okay. So a good kind of place to start. You might come from, say, tincturing if you have an interest in herbalism or alchemy. You might come from essential oils if you have an interest in aromatherapy, things like that. And if you're already into perfumery, you probably have some knowledge about absolutes and CO2s, which are a little bit more advanced. But let's say if you're starting from the camp of tinctures, that's just one facet of what goes into an attar. Now, with perfumes, tinctures are probably used quite a lot more. And basically, they are just a material that is suspended in ethanol, which is the ether. That's the medium that the material is going to be in, and it preserves it when it's in there. So tinctures can last for many, many years. I think Mandy had on display a 100-year-old ambergris tincture. So that shows how long tinctures can really last. But it's a little...
And they only get better.
Yes, yeah, they do. But with one exception is flowers. Now, flowers are kind of the area that's a little bit different, because if you leave the flower petals in, they degrade quite quickly. They're so gentle and volatile that they'll turn brown, and it will affect the tincture, because when the flower starts to kind of fall apart and decay, it'll just turn into that. It'll become part of the tincture, and you don't want that in. You just want the fresh kind of scent from the flowers. So with flowers, you would put them in the ethanol for a day or 2 days, remove them, put again in, and you might do this up to 30 times to get a really, really high quality tincture that could be a perfume in its own right. Now, if you want to advance from tinctures, you probably want to get base oils.
I have a question about tincture. Stay in here 1 second.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
What we didn't cover this, and it's a big question.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you have to have different. So if you have a super dry ingredient, 190 proof's okay. But what if your ingredient's wet?
Right.
Is the 190 proof okay?
Yeah. So ideally, you want everything dry before tincturing, because any water content is going to cause problems later on. So ideally, the driest you can get something. Say, for example, you have frankincense. Now, frankincense appears dry, but when you crush it, it does have moisture in there. So it's good to leave your frankincense for maybe a few days to air once it's been crushed, and that'll allow some of that moisture to escape before you tincture it. If, for example, you want to tincture fruit, you want the peels to be dry when they go in. You don't want to put wet peels in because they have a water content. And if you make your tincture, when you evaporate it down, if you're going to make an absolute from this, all the ethanol is going to evaporate off the alcohol. And the last thing to evaporate off is going to be the water. And you're going to be left with the separation of oil and water because they don't mix. So you're going to have to get rid of that water content. And you're likely, even if you've dried your materials really well, there's still a very high chance you're going to have a water content at the end. So that needs to be taken care of with just gentle heating, which will get rid of the water. And it's a little bit more painstaking to get rid of the water than it is the ethanol.
What if you like have 150 proof, 120 proof, 200 proof? Does that matter or not?
It does matter a lot. Like a lot of advice I got when I first started tincturing, when I looked online, was giving different proofs for different materials. So saying using like 65%, you would say here 130 proof for herbs and say 150 proof for flowers and so on. In my experience, I find that the highest proof is the best because of the water content. Simply because of that, you do not want water in the end. And I think a lot of perfumers probably don't know about this, especially if they do perfumes instead of attar, that they are highly likely to have water left. They might be using tinctures in their perfumes and mixing synthetics in there, and there's highly likely a water content in the perfume. But because there's no oil in there, everything is these aroma chemicals and ethanol, alcohol. There's no oil in there to make it visible. So they end up with water in their perfumes, which I don't know what actual effect it will have because that's not my area of expertise in perfumes. But in attar, it causes a problem.
Gotcha. Last question here before we move on to after tinctures is, and this was asked quite a few times, can we use a coffee grinder for the frankincense?
You can, but you might explode your coffee grinder. So I find the best way for frankincense is a marble or granite or stone pestle and mortar. So not a coffee grinder for your frankincense. But if you're in a pinch, you could possibly use it. But the likelihood is, I've tried this, so I'm talking from experience. It's gonna turn into stones and bounce off the plastic and probably crack the plastic and maybe shatter your blade. And definitely don't try it with hardwoods or Hieracium.
I'm glad you said that. Okay, let's move on to after tinctures. What do we do to make it smell even better?
So to reduce the tincture, it's simply evaporation and then getting rid of the water content at the end. But there can be quite unexpected things happen with different materials. So, for example, frankincense will turn into a kind of crystalline oil, and copal will do this even more. So copal, when you turn it to an absolute, what is this one?
Well, this was full. This is the tobacco one.
Okay.
This was full. So what you're talking about, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, so it's slowly evaporating down. So what you'll find the difference with, say, tree resins, they will turn into very, very thick, sticky oils. Frankincense sticky. I think it tends to be the whiter the resin, the more sticky and crystalline it becomes. And the darker the resin, the more oily and resinous it becomes, like a tar. This is just from my experience of doing these different tree resins. I
actually had an advanced perfumer talk about this with copal specifically.
Right.
And they don't even want to mess with copal. I have it somewhere in another room. But anyways, so when it does get sticky and you put it in, my tincture, it's not sticky at all. So if I put it in the perfume, Like, do I have to be worried about it getting really sticky on somebody's skin?
Right. So a couple of attas are made from these. One was number 270, which was Marwan, which was made from a South Madagascar myrrh. And it was a very, very sticky resin that came from this absolute that I made. But I balanced it with the very soft essential oil bases and solvent properties of tinctures. So I used a soap myrrh tincture. It's a type of African myrrh, really pleasant scent. And that made it a lot less sticky and movable and turned it into an oil. And then the soft resins just made it a lot softer on the skin and took out that sticky property. So just getting a good balance between the oil, the tincture, and the absolute makes a really huge effect. And this is something I've discovered, and I've never learned this from anywhere else. This is something from my own discovery, is that when you mix absolutes, tinctures, and essential oils, they form a kind of synergy together. They just work off each other so much that the scent becomes better than all of the parts.
So when you put a note in there, you're essentially using every level of it.
Yeah, yes.
It gives you a different scent profile, each one of them.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and it builds that body up. So if you can imagine kind of a body, like if you're going to use just, say, vanilla oleo resin, you're going to have a part of the body. If you use some vanilla absolute, you might have some legs. Use some CO2, you might have some arms. You're building up that body of scent.
That's well said. Okay, I have really quick here. You brought up oleoresin, so I have that right here. So this is the vanilla oleoresin. It's not going to focus in. I'll do it while you're talking. Ambergris resinoid from you.
Yeah.
Okay, oleoresin, resinoid, and absolute. What's the definition? Same thing. What's the definition of those?
So these tend to be a little interchangeable depending on who you're getting it from and how they classify the process of what they have done. So say, for example, vanilla oleoresin, you'll get vanilla oleoresin and you'll get vanilla absolute. Now, the techniques that they use are usually kept quite quiet, and it's hard to know exactly what they do to get this. But it appears to all be a solvent used to reduce, to extract the main oil. So with vanilla, it could be alcohol used, or it could be hexane used to separate out the oil. And then you're going to be left with a tar at the end, or an oil at the end of that. Now, they may call that an absolute if they did that with a solvent. They may call that a oleoresin if they did that with alcohol. There may be some processes I am not aware of, because it's probably the category I know the least about compared to essential oils, absolutes, tinctures, CO2 extracts. Oleoresins are a little bit of a perhaps subjective thing. Like I said, somebody will make what I would call an absolute extract, and they may call it an oleoresin. So again, it can be just down to their own individual method.
Mean, on this one, I can buy an absolute or an oleoresin. I was like, what's the difference? Oleoresin smells a lot better to me.
Okay. I find that I have two different oleoresins here, and I have a absolute, and there's quite a difference in how they visually look. So the oleoresin's a really thick oil, and I think this is probably an alcohol extraction of vanilla beans. And the vanilla absolute, I think, is a hexane extraction, and it has a gritty quality to it. It's almost crystallized. I can't really show you in here because the bottle is very dark, but it's a very thick substance. I can show you actually if I'm making this atta today, I can show you the vanilla absolute. Yeah, and then the tincture, obviously, that is just the material and the ethanol base. And then the CO2 extract is that complex machinery that was usually used for cannabis initially to extract compounds from cannabis was used on a lot of other perfumery materials, and found that they're extremely useful for food and for perfumery and for the cosmetic industry.
Do you recognize this?
Yes, my Resinoid.
Resinoid. Oh my gosh. This is one of the best things I've ever gotten from you.
Oh, awesome. I'm really happy.
It was a gift.
Uh-huh. I have a really interesting piece of ambergris coming soon. And I'm going to make Oceanus 2 with this because people were upset Oceanus sold out so quickly. So I have a piece coming with a squid's beak in, which is really interesting. So I thought it's just straight away like a kraken or a kraken. This thing, it's just a 15 gram ball of ambergris with a squid's beak kind of poking out of it.
What color?
It's kind in between kind of brown and grey. So I was looking for a very specific piece of ambergris. I wanted something with more ambery qualities, and there were 2 available. This was one of them, and I hope to get the other one as well. I could only really get one initially. I have so many outgoings at the moment. I just stuck with one piece. But yeah, this one looks just fantastic. So I thought it was a good inspiration for the next Oceanus.
Oh man, the people will be excited for that one.
Yeah, I'll post pictures when I get it.
Good. Or we'll put it up here too.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll almost not want to break it down. It looks so cool, the piece.
Will you tincture the beak?
No, I think I'll keep the beak. If it's in a piece, I was told that it's actually quite degraded, the beak, and it doesn't hold a lot of weight. Because I wondered how much the beak would weigh in comparison to the piece of ambergris. And apparently the beak's a little degraded, so there might just be fragments of it left. But it looks like a whole parrot's beak from the piece picture.
Well, and for people who don't know, the beak is actually the gold of what makes ambergris. From what I understand, the whale swallows and eats all these beaks. It gets stuck in the stomach. Mm-hmm. And there's no definitive answer on what end it comes out of.
Yeah.
It comes out of one of the ends, and then the ocean does the rest of the magic with this beak and whatever's inside the whale's gut.
Yeah.
Together.
There was one book, I held the same idea that I thought it was vomit for a long time, that the whale actually threw it up. And I did a lot of research, and I'd kind of satisfied in my knowledge that it was actually vomit. And then there was a perfumer. I wish I could remember the name of the book. And this even crossed my mind before the interview that we might go into this subject. Is he wrote a book, and from a lot of DNA samples of the ambergris, it shows there are some traces of not fecal matter, because that's purified through the process on the sea, but that there are some chemical markers in there that show it actually passes through the colon. Okay. So it appears to me from this book that it may actually be whale poop that's purified by salt on the ocean and the sun beating down on it. And then further things happen if it gets put on the shore. Wherever it lands can influence its scent quite a lot.
Sure.
So one of the pieces I was interested in was a piece that had been sitting in seaweed for whoever knows how long, but it absorbed the scent of the seaweed and made it like kind of amber seaweed combination. So this really interested me, that there's more aspects than just what the whale has eaten. Yeah.
Oh, shit.
So this is why every piece can be different, because it can travel for so long on the sea that affects its color, ranging from black to brown to gray to white, and other colors in between, from where it lands, what the whale's eaten, the whale's health, different things like this.
That's amazing. Do you want to talk about the ambergris resinoid or no?
Sure, we can, if you want to.
So we're at that point of how do we make stuff smell better. So we've talked about resinoids, absolutes, oleoresins. They may be from different substances. That may be the difference, but I guess.
So generally what I could cover with this alongside the ambergris is about resinoids, because I didn't mention anything about resinoids particularly. So a resinoid an oleoresin and a resinoid may be called the same thing. I say maybe here because I don't know the exact way different companies are producing oleoresins, but I tend to know the way that they're producing resinoids. So if I took some Apopanax and crushed it, tinctured it, filtered it, evaporated it down, I would end up with what could be called an absolute, but a better term for it would be a resinoid. Because that is primarily resin, they would give the name to it of a resinoid. But the process of that, turning it into an absolute, if I did that with sarsaparilla, it would not be called a resinoid because it doesn't hold a lot of resin in there. It is, I don't know exactly what material is left over. The oily substances, it would be essential oils, fats, waxes, perhaps some other aromatic compounds, but that would not be primarily a resin, so they wouldn't call it a resinoid. They would call it an absolute. So the ambergris resinoid that I made, that material that's left over at the end resembles a wax, but it's not necessarily a wax like you would categorize as a floral wax. So a floral wax, this I can touch just briefly on enfleurages and waxes, yes, because they're another topic, just to clarify the difference between ambergris resinoid, which looks like a wax, and actual waxes. So the actual waxes come from the first process of an absolute. Usually there's another way to make them, and that would be the hexane extraction. So you would be left with a concrete at the end, which would be then processed again to make the absolute. So before this process of the absolute, it is called a concrete. And that concrete, when it's processed, it's going to produce your absolute, and it's also going to produce a byproduct of waxes. Those floral waxes, what they're often called, or waxes, are often used for candles and not for perfumery because they'll cloud up blends. They won't mix with oil at all. But the ambergris resinoid, when you get it down to its kind of prime matter, taking away the physical matter, and you're left with the oil, this is not a wax in the same type of the absolute process where you're left with a byproduct of wax from the absolute. This is more resembles a resinoid with waxy properties, if that's not too complicated. So you'll see that piece that you have, it melts in your hand. If you leave it long enough in your hand, it'll turn back into an oil. It's just held as a wax in temperature. So once it reaches perhaps 40 degrees, it's going to turn back into a liquid again.
I mean, you don't want to use for perfumery, though.
Sorry?
This is the one you don't want to use for perfumery?
Oh, yes, you can. This resinoid, the absolute resin.
The enfleurage wax you don't want to.
Oh, the enfleurage wax is the one you don't want to use. So not the enfleurage wax, the absolute wax. So the enfleurage wax is, again, slightly different from the absolute wax. So the enfleurage wax is when you take a base fat, like it could be animal fat, or it could be palm fat or coconut fat, and you have that as a solid base, and you put your flowers on. The flowers will be absorbed, the scent will be absorbed into the fats. You can then take that, and that could either be your enfleurage just as it is.
And you do this every day, right? This is an everyday thing also, right?
Sorry?
The flowers you take on and off every day.
Yes, you do. Yeah. Similar to the process of a tincture. Mm-hmm. So you'd be changing them every 24 to 48 hours, usually. That somebody made a really interesting list online, and I can't remember where I found it, but somebody had experimented a lot with tinctures and enfleurages, and they'd made an actual little chart of which flowers degrade quicker than others. So roses were like 24 hours, frangipani was 48 hours. I think there was a couple of other flowers which were 72 hours, but I don't remember off the top of my head. But that was quite interesting.
That brings up an interesting question on roses.
Uh-huh.
That's huge for Eastern Italis, correct?
Yeah, yes.
So, but we are not supposed to I heard they're not good for enfleurage. Roses, I mean, just the scent's not there versus an essential oil.
Now, I've not tried a rose enfleurage myself. I've not did many enfleurages. Actually, I've only did one while I was in Kenya. I did a frangipani enfleurage. So that was my only experiment into those. So I've not tried rose. I've seen other perfumers who've tried it. And I think just from what I've read, that it's probably not worth doing because the absolute is a lot more available. The essential oil is also quite available, but a very high price. And the CO2 extracts are a possibility as well. So I think the enfleurage is probably not worth the time, but I couldn't say that 100% because I've not tried it.
What I was getting at was there's certain flowers you should or shouldn't. I guess you could do it with anything then is what I'm hearing from you.
I think so, but again, I don't have the experience to back that up, and I like to speak from experience. So really, my only experience is with frangipani, and then just hearing what other perfumers have done with it. So I didn't find it a really good way of making ingredients. Perhaps it's really interesting. It was a nice hobby and a nice experience because you could really capture the scent of a lot of flowers around you without complex equipment. If you want to make it yourself, you could do that easier than an essential oil and easier than an absolute. Exactly. And easier probably, well, maybe on par with the tincture, pretty much the same.
Gotcha. Okay, let's but and this resinoid that you've done with the ambergris, not many people have done this. This isn't something you can buy easily, right?
Yeah, a few more people have done it. There are a couple of other people who I've seen, actually 3 other people who I can think of from memory have done it, but it's not widely available at all. And I think, it's just like people speaking about what they've done, that inspires other people like, oh, I can do it in this way. And then it triggers a little wave of people doing it.
But the smell is incredible too. And it's a really process.
Yeah, yes, it is. It's quite a time. It takes time, the process, but the result is so amazing at the end. And once you perfect it and get it.
Do you want to talk about the 4 steps to do it or no?
Sure, I can run through it briefly. So it's just tincturing your ambergris. Ideally, you probably want to leave it a year to tincture, but it is totally feasible to do it before then. And so you make your tincture, leave it to mature, filter off the matter at the end. So take yours is looking nice and dark now. Excellent. So you filter the masher out, pour it into another vessel so it's free of all the base matter at the bottom. Let that evaporate down. You can do it naturally or you can heat it gently, not past 40 degrees. When it gets to a state where it'll either one of 2 things will happen. If the water content is a little high in your ambergris, it may turn into a fat, what appears to be like a very spongy, soft fat. And when it reaches that stage, you're going to have to apply a little bit more heat to turn that into an oil again and get rid of the water content, because that's basically what it is. It's oil and water that's mixed together. So you want to reduce that to the oil and then get rid of that excess water content. And that's when it's going to solidify. Once all the water's gone, it'll solidify into that resinoid with a waxy appearance.
And it smells unbelievable.
Yeah, it's amazing. And Onicha is very similar. It just unlocks the scent. It's like you thought ambergris was really nice, so a lot of people think it's very subtle and they can barely smell it. But when you unlock its scent and you smell it for what it really is, it's such an amazing material. And it really fascinates me how some noses are so sensitive in our past that they've smelled things like a civet cat and thought, there's something in there that is really special. And they've just locked onto a little aromatic compound in there. I mean, the Norma scone if I remember rightly, it's Normuscone in civet, is quite a small amount. It's not really dominant. It's under 50%, if I remember rightly. Oh, very nice. You have some civet paste. Excellent. Is that from Dan?
Yeah. Yes. You're the first person I got it from.
Oh, okay.
Did you get it from Dan, the one you sent me?
I did, yes.
I remember opening that thing. I mean,
yeah, you'll have dogs chasing you in the street if you get a bit on you.
Oh, my bulldog loves it.
Yeah. Yeah, I spilled some castoreum on me, and yeah, it got some dogs' attention when I passed it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, so this stuff can't be used directly in a perfume. So some people might get a little bit eager to use civet directly in a perfume, but really it needs to go through the tincturing process first, because you can get an absolute of civet, which can be used directly in a perfume, but civet paste, ideally, from my experience, needs to be tinctured first, and then you use the tincture and not the material.
Stinks so bad.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm going to grab my civet. I have a civet here, and I just have to...
Oh, my gosh.
I just have to empathize with you here and smell it too.
Yeah, I have to, whenever you mention something, that's how I am. I don't want to touch this bag. This is, wow.
It makes it more difficult when you have it in a bag, because then you're much more likely to get it on your fingers.
So I'm glad I can't put this straight into a composition. I have to tincture this right away.
Yeah, I would tincture it. Yeah, definitely. But I find that there's a great similarity between this and sweet flag, also known as Acarus calamus, which is a herb, and it shares a lot in common with this. It has that very, very waxy aroma, and this is why it's so valuable for perfumery.
What percentage is yours at right now?
This is an absolute. So this is not a tincture. This is the absolute, and it's almost the same aroma as the raw paste. There's a small difference. This is a little bit of a narrower band of scent than the civet paste. I have some civet paste around, but I don't remember exactly where. So, lovely! I got a little.
It's shame that Russian Atom is not using this stuff.
Yeah, it is a real shame, and I think synthetic civet is such a big leap away from real civet. It just does not have the character at all.
I agree 100%. Like, I just reviewed Grandinha, and if real civet was in Grandinha, it would be all the difference.
Yeah.
Right now, it just smells like this old lady powder, but I can already tell mixed with this, it's weird.
Yeah.
What civet does with stuff like that. It's weird.
Yeah, it's been a real focal point for perfumery in the past as well. Like, I think around the 50s and 60s and 70s, maybe more to the 50s and 60s, as civet, there were quite a few civet perfumes where civet was the dominant note. And now that would offend so many people. It's usually done as a kind of almost either a gimmick or a kind of, tip your hat to the perfumery of old. Now, so it's either for gimmicky people who want a really animalic scent but don't understand it, or people who really want to smell the core of old perfumery. And that's what I try to make Zabad as, that kind of tip your hat to old perfumery. You're still reeling in shock from Zabad.
No, Zabad's the only fragrance that I still have to. And I've had some strong fragrances.
Yeah.
To get you, Mustafa loves that thing.
Yeah, yes, it's a love or hate for sure. It is. And when I was making it, people keep asking me to make really, really animalic attas, push it to the very limit. And a lot of the time when I make really animalic attas, they tend to reach a point where they switch from really aggressive to really beautiful. There's just some reaction that happens with different musks that when they're combined, they just turn into such beautiful scents. So I wanted to make Zabad stay away from that reaction, and I wanted to get that pure feel of civet in there. So I really focused heavily, and that's why it was a lot more minimal than other things. And it was just deer musk, ambergris, and civet. I didn't put any hyraceum or onycha in that to try and just keep that minimal civet approach.
And that's become a cult favorite, I'm sure. Like
it has, yeah. It really has. Yeah, yes. Oh. There's been a few in the past. That Musca Maharaja, which was I think my third Muscata. I made Moss-Just Supreme, which was my first one, and one of the best, but really rare ingredients that are still so hard to get now. And then I think it was Miscal Jannah, and then Musca Maharaja. And there's been a trend of those Muscatas, and there's probably only been about 10 of them over 5-6 years.
Wow.
Yeah, because they're just
so people look for you to release that, right?
Yeah, yes, yeah. I'll go back and I'll do those ones. It's just getting time in with so many in the back catalogue. It takes a lot of time to work through what I'll do next.
I mean, in truth, Suga Musk is really what blew up the connection with you and me.
Yeah.
And if I told you that should not have happened.
Yeah.
I was buying stuff on, you know how on Etsy, it's the stupidest shopping cart ever?
Oh, you said, yeah.
No offense. So like, you probably did a post and I went and added it to a cart, which I didn't think nothing about it.
Right.
And then somebody released something on there that was special. And I went, it was Dixit and Zach.
Okay.
It was my Rising Mysore.
Yeah.
So the famous bottle, it's their first famous one. That's like the most coveted perfume there is. Mm-hmm. It was that order. I had to buy it. I'm like, because they just put one up on that site, which nobody knew about because they had a different, part of why I got one was because they didn't have it together that way. They had a website for Dixit and Zach. And then I knew about Agra Psalm on Etsy, and they posted Rising Mysore there. I'm so like, click, okay.
Right.
And your stuff was in there.
Oh, wow.
I was so excited to get Rising Mysore. I didn't look at anything else. And then like a month later, I get a package, open it up. It's I'm like, what the heck? I go look. And then I smell it, and the rest is history.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. Yeah, an act of synchronicity.
Yeah. Especially, yes. Rising Mysore and Suga Musk, amazing.
Excellent.
Some things are meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So ambergris resinoid's pretty easy to make. This, I'm at 40 ml right here. This would probably be 3 ml resinoid?
Perhaps, you might get 3 grams from it. Yeah. I know, it's kind of sad, when you think of how small it gets, but once you know that end result and how potent it is, it beats all of that. What you have there would be nice for putting in different attar. You can't put too much in one attar because too much of a tincture is going to really imbalance it and make it diffuse too quickly. So it needs, what I tend to do is keep it to about 1% ethanol, my attar, and I don't always use tinctures. Sometimes I'll make them free of any tinctures. Sometimes I use a little bit more if they need that. Like if I've used a really thick resinoid, it might need a little bit more of a tincture to make it more fluid. But yeah, in general, you can't really put a lot of tincture in one attar, but you can put a lot of resinoid in one attar and make that such a potent scent. So I find it's much more valuable to have a smaller amount of a stronger scent than it is to have a large amount of a weaker scent.
Gotcha. Okay, do you have anything else for resinoids, oleoresins? What else? Enfleurage?
CO2s can touch upon a little bit. And these are, again, I don't know a lot of deep information about them, but from the cannabis industry, it started when they were extracting THC and CBD and waxes and different things from the cannabis. And then it was thinking how that these big machines that they've made to do these operations, what else could they be used for? So this got taken up with perfumery, and people just started experimenting with CO2s and finding that they're really useful. And what makes CO2s kind of a really complex subject is because I think of the calibration of the machines. So it takes quite a lot of knowledge to calibrate the initial machines that came out. So it was done by kind of, knowledgeable people in the industry to make these and perfect it so that you would get a specific oil at the end of it. And there's different types of CO2s. So you can have a total CO2, which is to their specifications, whatever they have calibrated the machine at, it will put out a complete CO2 of that oil, of that material. So it isn't processed in any way. Then there is a CO2 select, which is, it goes through a further process. So they're looking for just specific things. There might be something they're trying to keep out of the end product, or just a specific note they want to achieve, either a scent they want to keep out or a particular molecule they want to keep out of the CO2 at the end because it could be possibly toxic or sensitizing or something. So yeah, you'll find like turmeric CO2 total, black pepper CO2 total, black pepper CO2 select. And the select basically means that they've narrowed that machine down to output a specific aromatic profile or texture of oil at the end. So they might not want the wax. They might want it to be a liquid, in which case you might get a select. But because every single different ingredient is different and it's probably a different calibration needed for each material, this makes it a really complex subject because every CO2 could be possibly calibrated slightly differently by different manufacturers, and different selects could be different calibrations as well, making it quite a complex subject. But that's just a little dip in the toe of the pool of CO2s.
Excellent. Have you tried oud CO2s?
I have, yes, and I was a little bit let down. I've only tried 4 oud CO2s so far, and they really didn't compare to the absolutes for me. One was from Eden Botanicals. One I don't know if I should mention because I don't really have a good opinion about their oils, and I don't really want to put that out on the air. But and it's like a well-known producer, and I really didn't like the oils that I got from them. So yeah, I've not had a good impression of CO2 so far.
I don't like any ouds from any of the mainstream places.
No.
Like some of their plantation stuff's okay, but I just know so much better for the same price.
Yeah, I'm the same as well. Yeah, I have suppliers I've known for many years that are very reliable for amazing quality foods, and it's just one of those out of the way things that is has to be searched.
And that's who I started with. I've tried every one of them.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay, that's good. CO2s, absolutes.
I think that's covered pretty much most of it. There's probably a couple of other little things that can be touched upon. Nothing jumps to mind immediately, but there are other methods out there for getting scent from oils.
And I have this in another video. I might mesh with this video.
Essential oils. Apologies, we kind of missed out essential oils.
Yeah, that's true. There's how many are there to get essential oils?
Yeah. So essential oils are really, you take the plant matter, and they can be done in a couple of different ways that are commonly known. One is the hydrodistillation, where the material is put in water and it is boiled, heated up. The temperature can vary for the material and what the distiller wants as the end result. So flowers may be distilled at a lower temperature because they're more volatile and you want more high notes in the end product. Some materials might be done at a higher temperature if it needs to kind of penetrate the material a lot more. But from my knowledge, low temperature distillations are better the yield is smaller, it takes longer, but the quality is better. So the second method is steam distillation, where usually you would have a grate where the material would be suspended. Say if you had a bowl, for example, your water is going to be in the bottom half. You'll have a grate and you'll have the material on the top part. Say, for example, it could be basil or marjoram, herb, which you would likely steam distill because some properties may be destroyed easier by the water and you might get a better smelling oil at the end. Some people for quantity will do both at the same time. They'll do a hydro and steam at the same time for maximum quantity, and you might get a slightly more full aroma because it mixes kind of two methods of distillation together. So you have your hydro in the water. You might do that for frankincense. Excuse me. You might do that for woods, and then for your herbs and flowers, you might do steam distillation, do those in the top part. So essentially what you're getting out is, in alchemy, what would be called the soul of the plant. And when you're doing an absolute in alchemy, what they would call that is the spirit of the plant you would get out. And there's also a third method of extraction, but that's not used for perfumery. So yeah, what the people believed in the past, who were the kind of early alchemists, and they would believe they were getting the soul of the plant out, and they knew it had medicinal properties. They commemorated this in kind of artwork that was very encrypted because it was such a revered art that they believed it held this kind of mythical significance and hid it from a lot of people. So yeah, it was this kind of hidden, secretive art for a while. I think that was perhaps when the West had kind of co-opted this method of extracting oils, because before that in India and in Arabia, it wasn't coveted like that. It was coveted in a different way because it was such an amazing thing you were getting out at the end. And it seems that there may even be references in the Bible that when Jesus was apparently given gold, frankincense, and myrrh, that the frankincense may have actually been an oil that was distilled because he was anointed with it. So you can't anoint somebody with the gum. It would have had to been extracted in some way to use that. So it goes back very far. And yeah, so essential oils, they're mostly touted for their medicinal benefits. And this is why natural perfumery is so important and amazing, is because it harnesses that power of aromatherapy in there. So the core of natural perfumery is essentially these old medicines that we're using and blending for a kind of soul medicine, but it also has a physical benefit to them as well. So it's a spiritual benefit first. And this comes in examples of Egypt, where they were making perfumes and making incenses, and even to Moses was instructed to make a very specific incense. This was to burn, and it was that combination. It wasn't to be altered, this combination. It had to follow a specific quantity of different oils to make, I believe it was it Kemet or Kaifi, or I might be mixing the name up. The name might come to me shortly. There's a few that begin with K, but yeah, they would make this very specific ratio of scents to kind of open up that divine atmosphere of spirituality for their temple. So yeah, it's really its prime origin of essential oils as medicine. And then with natural perfumery, we've taken that and adopted aspects of alchemy and natural medicine and aromatherapy together with a lot of religious materials that are now, a lot of people think are just this, I like to smell nice and I like to smell something good, but I think there's a lot more importance there, that there's some kind of connection, and it opens things up within a person. Like we talked about sensitivities. And when you're surrounded with synthetics, your sense starts to become dulled and attuned to that kind of synthetic. And that synthetic is fake nature. So you're training your nose to sense something fake. And if you think maybe on a spiritual term, what you might be doing to yourself there is like you're just, training yourself in something that is fake. What benefit is that going to give? If you train yourself in something real that's rooted in nature, when you smell a natural perfume, you're like, this comes directly from a pine tree. That's like that. Mm-hmm. Some people might scoff at this, but my kind of root is very much in like science and logic and reason, but I am very much a religious and spiritual person as well. So I like to look at both camps and say, yes, there's a lot of benefits from these natural scents that affect the spirit and the soul, if you like to call it that, mm-hmm. In a positive manner. Whereas experiments have shown with synthetics, there was one gentleman, I wish I could remember his name, but he did a lot of experiments with essential oils, and he'd actually tested them on his own son, and he'd made a lot of like strange blunders, like it burnt his arm severely. And when he went to dip it in a pool of water in his laboratory, and it was actually lavender essential oil, he dipped his whole arm in, and he thought, oh no, this is going to make it much worse. And it actually sped up the healing of the wound much faster than water would have done. So this triggered things in his mind. He'd experimented on his children of all things of kind of allowing them to breathe the fumes of essential oils, and he found that they are much more relaxed and focused. I don't know exactly how he studied this, but just from memory, some example I can give of how people would, when synthetics came into the market, they were sensing that this does something negative. And he had synthetic aromatic chemicals that he was also did the same experiments with, and found that it had a lot of negative effects on his children. They would hold their breath. They would get a raised heart rate. They would feel anxious. They'd get headaches. They'd feel like vomiting. So straight away, you can see if you train your nose to be sensitive to naturals, see what happens. Train your nose to be sensitive to some synthetics and see what happens. Take a little journal and note down, do one for a week and do another for a week, and see if your body can sense something that your mind can't sense.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the best things that we could do is what you're talking about. The further I go into it on what you're talking about, so I'll go back and where even my Russian Atoms, my favorite perfumes, and it's so funny how my body is like rejecting the synthetics in them.
Yeah. I
don't know if it's no sensitivity or if it's my body, because I feel like my body's just projecting, like, get off of me.
Yeah.
The synthetics, like loud. I'll fill up a room.
Yeah.
And I've a couple people have been here and I've been able to show them this phenomenon. And then it's like soap, whatever. It just like our bodies are telling us what it wants, right? And that's what we're built for.
Definitely,
we're created for with food. It tells us when we're hungry. Essentially, oils go into the body, and it is a source of nutrients.
Yes.
And then if we study the mind, which we were getting into earlier in the conversation, the quickest way to the mind is through the nose. That's the first sense. That's our mind trigger everything.
Yeah, it hits the olfactory bulb, which is like at the root of the brain there.
And it gives us so many scents, good, bad. Like it smells like, I wish we could talk to blind people. We can. Maybe we should someday. Of how they use their sense of smell to communicate.
Because with who, sorry?
Blind people.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They would have to communicate with the nose, and there's so much communication involved. Smelling. Even to the point where a famous distiller or a guy who sells oils over here in America, he's older, he teaches, he has a blog. I might post it down here, his teaching. And he has scientific data. So this is not just theory anymore. He has scientific data of people actually smelling different when they lie. And you can smell an aroma off of somebody when they're lying.
Yeah.
So it's funny how the sense of smell has so many communicative factors.
Yeah, it does. And I think we've lost that as well, that ability. And I think that ability would have been much stronger in generations past, say before synthetics came, before things that perhaps polluted the air around us came. Although you could argue the fact that there's kind of a lot of natural pollution from the earth, like ashes and volcano or sulfur, things like this. But I think, yeah, we would have that sense of smell far more attuned if we were living around a lot of nature instead of living in cities where the earth is paved over, and it's almost like a layer between you and the earth. Now you're not connected to it anymore, and we're like that in the city. We're slightly removed out of our environment. And I'm not saying that we should naturally be living in bushes and trees, but that if we had a house that it's surrounded by greenery, and most of us are detached from that. We're not in connection with nature anymore. And that sounds a little bit kind of hippie-ish and new age-ish, and perhaps, I am even slightly veering towards that with the time, with the more I learn, is that you really do, humans need that connection with nature. We don't survive well when we detach ourselves from nature and we start ingesting fake food, fake perfume, clothes that are completely synthetic. We're watching things that have no basis in reality, or listening to things that are kind of really distorted or discordant. Like all of these things, I think, take away from that natural thing that our body really wants. And we don't recognize it consciously because we're slowly also being removed from our own subconscious gradually, because the world we're in at the minute is far more material than it is spiritual. Although there are great communities and there are centers and pockets, generally, as a generalization, spirituality is scoffed at as a something that doesn't have any basis for it. But in its own definition, it's something kind of hidden from the senses, and you have to attune your senses to be able to sense that, to be able to notice it.
And fragrance does help.
It really does, yeah.
I would argue it forever about that it would help.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Those subtle fluctuations in scent between different distillations, and your nose can pick up on that chemical formula that's in that product, and it senses it. You don't know from visually looking at that materially. What can you assess from that oil? Very little. Its color, its viscosity, things like this, its temperature, perhaps even from touching it. But your nose can take in so much more information, and you don't know how that is happening. That is beyond your ability, your immediate ability to say, oh yes, I've just smelled alpha terpene, I've just smelled beta terpenol, I've just smelled eugenol, and eugenol does this, and like to know all these things we don't know. But when we study and look into it, the body is responding in a very positive way and a very complex way to essential oils and to perfume in general.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're over an hour, and I'm going to have to figure out how we're going to do this video. We good content, but we went back and forth.
We did, yeah. We juggled a little bit.
We'll see how it goes over. Answered some questions. Thanks, Alex, for being on the channel again.
No problem, Brandon. Very happy to be on. It's always a pleasure.
And I always link his store down below, so you guys check it out. Everybody, all love from the channel, and be blessed. That's good stuff. Good stuff.
Awesome.